Hi, I'm Dominique Edwards, and this is the Walker Street Park Community Garden, and we're doing a series of classes over the next couple of weeks. And the garden here has been here for 3 years, and we are currently doing a number of awesome community initiatives, such as our community cooking classes. We're getting ready to launch our Eastport Community Culture Kitchen, which is going to be a multicultural and intergenerational class or classes for everyone. And we're located in Michigan City in the Eastport neighborhood, and we're housed at the Walker Street Park in Eastport.
And who'd you have today talking? Who's leading class today?
And today we had an awesome class by Sam Love called Your Garden is Art. It was phenomenal. So we pretty much geeked out as urban planner to urban geographer. It was really quite amazing talking about Cooperation Jackson, Philadelphia, Gary, especially our favorite urban farm, Faith Farms, over in Gary in the Emerson neighborhood. So talking about different urban agriculture templates, turning vacant lots into urban farms, that type of deal. So we're geography, urban ag nuts, talking about how to turn these different vacant areas or underutilized green spaces and implementing green infrastructure to give rise to self-determination in our communities. So,
I'm not getting the numbers. I'm just getting your.
oh, here.
Hi, Linda.
Here we go.
miles from the Indiana border, but everything was farms to the south or east or west, but then north was all industrial.
What you're doing, you're not cutting the stem, take it from the
So I got my family involved. And so that is what really made this really successful this year. Yeah, I figured, did you want to have the forest as your background?
There's somebody was stealth camping back there, but I don't know if you saw that. There's a busted up tent. As somebody who's been watching videos on stealth camping lately,
I saw something back there last week,
the
and I wasn't sure what it was.
I didn't realize. I looked at your lineup. I was like, oh, why did I put 9? Everyone else had a sensible hour. So, and
partners get up early.
right. Well, I came all the way from Gary. I mean, I've been up since 4:30. So I'm like kind of midday for me, and I'll probably go to bed when I get home. Yeah, I will. So I may just.
It's like beautiful right now, so.
Oh, this is perfect. Yeah. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm Sam Love. I'm a friend of Dominique's, and I'm so happy she asked me to join today to come out here and talk in this series. And I had no idea what this looked like just using Google Earth to look from the satellite view. And once I got here, it's so beautiful. I mean, the form of it, how everything is growing, how it works with the park, the main, the recreational areas, the woods, and again, the form, these strong lines up through all of that. It's a really beautiful neighborhood too. I'm not really familiar with Michigan City. Again, I'm from Gary, lived my whole life in either Lake County or Cook County. And it's only been 4 or 5 years that I've known people out in Michigan City. So I have a lot to learn about this place. My background's urban history, and I'm a geography nut, so this is kind of up my alley. And I am a gardener too, and an artist. So I'll show you how it all works together. And what I wanted to do this morning, I want to open by talking about results found in an experiment conducted in Philadelphia a couple years ago, involving vacant lots. I want to share some of the experiences that I've had as a fellow. I've had a couple of fellowships the past 2 years. and it's taken me to study vacant lots. And a lot of cities are addressing issues of vacant lots by putting in gardens and green space. So I'm going to talk about my experiences visiting Jackson, Mississippi last year, which was amazing. You could everywhere you go, there's issues and struggles, and we're aware. If we're politically aware, we know the historical struggles in Mississippi. But what I saw there was beautiful. It really was I don't want to say a slice of heaven, but because that's cliche, but just people working together, working with the land, the knowledge people had in the land down there, and the graciousness of our hosts down there was just something that was amazing. We went to Newark, New Jersey, which I loved as well. I called Newark, New Jersey the biggest open-air black art museum I've ever been to in my life. But something about being down south, which I rarely get down south, was very charming. It was a beautiful place. So I want to share some of that, and I want to talk about what's happening in Gary, Indiana, and what's happened in Gary over the past 10 years. I think there's been an enormous paradigm shift on behalf of the people of Gary when it comes to gardening, urban gardening, backyard gardening. And I think that paradigm shift is happening with older folks, but most it's younger folks who are then going to the older folks and saying, you have skills, can you help us? And the older folks out there are saying, been waiting for this for decades. Yes. So it's really starting to show. And then I'll bring that all back to what I do in my garden and make that kind of the lesson part. And then, I don't know, if you're feeling inclined, we could make a little art of our own, but it's Saturday morning, and I mean, with the whole COVID thing, I've just been like, let's relax, let's get things done, but not go at it as much. So, you know, and let me just jump right into the kind of the lessons for today, which is how we can creatively address open lands and vacant lands in communities, but also how we can take some of that creativity and bring that into gardening. Because what I learned in Jackson, Philadelphia, Chester, Pennsylvania, Newark, Gary, wherever I go, there's a lot of people with growing skills, and there's a lot of artists, and there is a bit of an overlap with that. So we have these discussions about how all this can come together. Philadelphia, with its 40,000 vacant lots, they conducted a 3-year study. That's called a longitudinal study over time, where they took about 600 empty lots. 200 of them they upgraded. And by upgrading, what they did, they mowed them, they leveled the land, filled in little ruts and gaps. They planted grass, they put in trees, and they put in like low fences like what you have here. So not a privacy fence, but just a split rail fence. And that was 200 lots, randomly selected across the city. 200 lots got what's called the intervention treatment, which is once a month it got cleaned. It got mowed, the litter got picked up, but no trees, no grass, no fences, no benches, just that. And then 200 left as is. This study was conducted by, I need my reading glasses, the Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health, the Perelman School of Medicine, and the School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Pennsylvania. So medicine, even had some law enforcement, arts and sciences, all coming together. And what they found, they sent anthropologists to interview approximately 450 people who lived within, I think, a block or two of one of the 600 selected lots. These people were chosen at random. And what they found over 3 years, so they did this in 2015, and then 18 months later, they did the improvement, and they talked to the people again. And then 18 months later, after they had done a year and a half of cleaning and this and that, a third interview with these 450 residents. What they found was that people who lived near the upgraded or intervened lots, so the lots that were being at least cleaned or getting some kind of green infrastructure, 41.5% reported over those 3 years of a decrease in feelings of depression. 63% reported a decrease in feeling that they had poor mental health. In other words, 63% of people said they were feeling better just living near something that was getting cleaned up. 42% said that the feelings of depression maybe not full on depression, but when you catch it, like, whoa, that's something a depressed person thinks. Those feelings went away for the people who were living within a block or two of these cleaned up lots. The cost to do this work, each lot was $1,600 to upgrade. So $1,600 times 200 with a city budget, that's a drop, that's change. And then the cost of maintaining 400 lots for a year was $180 a lot. That's chump change when it comes to a city budget. Now, I mean, that's 400 lots, multiply it up to 40,000, I guess. But I mean, to me, that sounds like a worthy investment. And it wasn't just cleaning stuff up. If you see pictures, people were, is that the cicadas? No, that's yeah. I didn't think I'd be competing with them today. Yeah, I know. I was just wondering, like, where are they? Okay, during my talk, I get it. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a great investment into people. And if you see pictures, it wasn't just, people put murals on the buildings. People get involved in those lots. You create programs to where you can adopt a lot and start working and things like that. So it was the first of its kind study. And I think the findings really make it worth talking about repeatedly, about the impact that just basic cleanup can have on vacant spaces. And then we can add on to that, starting to grow things, whether it's private residential beds or something for a community to have. Again, I think these can be done economically and have a huge impact on the health of the community. I'm recording, it's all going to be wind and cicadas and train horns, by the way, but that's all right. I taught in downtown Chicago. You can imagine the distractions, even indoors. And I took my students outside quite a bit. So when we were in Jackson, though, we visited the Co-op of New West Jackson, which was a much smaller operation. It was, I'm going to actually call up, I have their information, so I can just read from them once it loads in. Okay, so I'm just going to read right from their website, the choice bits here. So the Cooperative Community of New West Jackson is an 8-block community nestled in a blighted, high-poverty, disenfranchised area of West Jackson, Mississippi. A community on the brink of extinction, us residents began a new grassroots movement in 2013 to rebuild our neighborhood from the inside out. Through a cooperative model, building true economic opportunity through resident-driven enterprises as an answer to generational poverty, systemic inclusion, and years of misguided charity work, our community is beginning to redefine what we consider an asset, understand the power of our cultural narrative, and find solutions for ourselves through working together. Cooperative Neighborhood Plan came together based on our shared priorities. We need to clean up, we need to make money, we need things for youth to do. Although the words may seem quick and simple, it was, is, and always will be a work in progress. Years of distrust, oppression, and neglect mean every step forward comes through a continuous conversation, relationship building, and the delicate balance of internal growth to external pressures. I would say what I saw touring that community completely matches up to what they put in their mission and vision statement there. Because people can give a vision and mission, and then you see the work they're doing, and they don't mix up at all. This was the real deal. 2013, they obviously been making a lot of progress, but one of the things that I learned, a lesson that I took with me and brought home, what they said was, we work on a little bit at a time, and we don't necessarily finish a part before we move on to the next part of the community. The idea is we don't want to give the impression that we're privileging one part of this 8-block area over another. So they're building a little greenhouse, different types of gardens, like a mint garden, the sensory garden, Maine vegetable garden, medicine garden, herb garden. I would say when we went for our tour, everything looked like it was about 75% done. And for me, that's how I've always worked. And I've been criticized through school and even my adult life, been told you got to focus on one thing, you got to be one thing. And it's like, honestly, I'm a writer primarily now, which is a good thing to do in pandemic times because social practice is difficult. I'm very happy to be with people today, though. I've been working alone since October, so this is really awesome. But as a writer, I'd rather have 5 pieces partially completed than 1 piece that's not complete. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather have that, so if I'm not on this, I can go write something else. And eventually what will happen over time is you have 5 almost fully completed pieces, and you just pick the one and do it. And that's how their garden, their community was. They had a number of houses that they were working on. They rent 4 homes out as Airbnb, and they said people come from all over the world to stay in this neighborhood that is one of the poorest in West Jackson. They can't even believe it themselves. The residents were like, I can't believe they come here, but we're happy to have them. We're happy to have their money. Because it's still like $150 a night to rent these beautiful homes. 4-square homes that have been done up in Art Deco colors. I didn't know that there was so much Art Deco architecture in Jackson. It's all over the place. It's amazing. So they took that style and those colors and worked it into these beautiful homes, inside and outside, and yeah, very desirable, and it's making money. They were working on an ice cream stand in one of the homes when we were visiting, because they said when summer comes, these kids are going to want to have ice cream to eat, but also a kid can run the ice cream stand. So we've created a little job, and they can buy it in bulk and save money. It's the power of working together. When you work together, everything can become easier when you have that plan. The woman whose family founded this was not from the neighborhood. She'd moved from Texas. She said, her name was Naya, said they took a couple of years to get to know the community before they even bought their first piece of property there. What I found very interesting was that not everyone who lived in that 8-block area was a part of the cooperative. But what she said was over the years, eventually either the residents who were skeptical joined the co-op happily when they saw the progress being made, or they didn't join in, but the landlords who were problems started getting their act together. And lo and behold, one of the homes that they said was kind of like the one problem home in that 8-block area, when we went to visit, it was getting a major repair. It's into their politics. What we are attempting to do is not a reactionary fight against impending gentrification. They said, quote, "It is a proactive measure to build and strengthen people in place to prevent displacement and build real wealth to alleviate poverty." I've been in activism for almost 20 years. It's really easy to get jaded, especially right now. There's a lot going wrong. But I'll tell you, when I was in that community, I'm like, they're going to do something here. Is the other weird thing too was being in Jackson, Mississippi in late October, and it's still the growing season down there, which not up here. So I was like, where am I? What is this wonderful place called Jackson, Mississippi, where in almost November it looked like this. One of the things I found really kind of cute and artsy was the Chili's restaurants, the big chili logo they have. Chili's had come and dropped off the pepper that they could just use as a sculpture in the garden. It didn't even say Chili's, it was just the pepper, so it wasn't like a commercial or anything. It just had this giant pepper. And of course, you had little murals and painting. Every box was painted a different bright color to, again, match those Art Deco style colors of the buildings in Jackson. So it was very visually appealing, and we had talked about doing it indoors with pictures, but that's why I'm recording, and I'll put my pictures in a film, and then I'll send the link, and you can all, if you want to take a look at some of that, you can see what they did over there. I'm a visual learner, so when I go to a garden, I'm like, I'm doing that, gonna do that, gonna do that, gonna do that. But yeah, they were building a water system, and again, it was only maybe half completed, so that they can just funnel water right into the beds from structures, drying houses, things like that. Another thing that I saw in Jackson that was really, to me, really optimistic was they were working in a lot of skill sharing. So you had older people who had traditional skills with their hands, construction skills, growing skills, and they were teaching that to younger people. I had mentioned Gary. So I think the biggest change that I have seen in Gary over time, over the past decade, has been the attitude towards growing food in Gary. 10 years ago with the starting in community organizing, and you think about 2010, Obama had been president for just a couple years. America didn't really know what a community organizer was or what we did. I think we kind of knew what we were doing. But, we want to try to find ways to get the community engaged. You want to deal with problems that the community has, empty lots. And so we would try to talk about, well, do we want to put some greenery in, or do we want to put an actual garden in? And the number of times people told us stuff like, I wouldn't eat anything grown here. It's dangerous to grow here. There were also from a lot of people from different ages, but people say, no, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow segregation, we moved here to get away from agriculture. But I do think it is a fact that the attitude in Gary has shifted from 180 degrees towards growing things. We have, I don't know if you're familiar with Faith Farms, which is in the Emerson community in the downtown area. They have taken, at this point, half a city block. I think they have 5 hoop houses. They got a goat hutch. They've got chickens. They've got an apiary. Probably even more. I haven't been out of my house very much in the past few months, but they're providing fresh food at a very low price to people in the neighborhood. They've partnered with Lake County organizations to get that produce into other communities that don't necessarily have access to fresh food and vegetables. And what I think is most amazing about Faith Farms is that their head grower, Frida Graves, who was in the fellowship with me. So when you travel all around, you get to know people, especially when you have a 5-hour airplane delay. I'm going to walk to Jackson the next time, get there quicker, I think. But she had told me she'd never gardened before starting this job. Had she ever told you that? Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
She was a nurse first.
Yeah, and she's definitely knows her business with that and with growing. And I think for her, it may have been an easy leap from one to the other. But if you go visit them and see what they're doing there, you tell me you've never done this before, you can't believe it. A lot of prayer, a lot of study, a lot of help from experts coming in, and then just work, a lot of work with it. I wrote an article last year about agriculture in Lake County, Indiana, which I'm sure when you think Lake County, Indiana, you think steel mills or cities before you would think agriculture. But and then what's going on with in Gary as well as East Chicago and Hammond as well is quite a change. So what I wrote specifically about Gary, for a majority black city like Gary, the new decade marks a unique moment. Older black residents who left the rural South for industrial work up north retain a knowledge of agriculture and are eager to share that knowledge with a younger generation, which is in turn increasingly interested in learning that skill set. Most of Gary's largest schools now have a gardening program. A West Side charter school raises chickens and goats, selling eggs and milk to local businesses. A handful of community gardens have found the key to sustaining multi-year projects. It was funny, I put in here how the scale of these projects is nothing compared to traditional agriculture, but I did some work in a rural community, Carroll County, last year, and I was talking about that with them, and I was trying to I'm not trying to say we're going to grow our food in cities and replace you all down here, and one farmer goes, oh yes you are. I mean, he was convinced urban agriculture was the wave of the future and not this corporate agriculture that we see downstate. It has been nearly a decade since I was last asked if I would feel safe eating something grown in Gary, and that is a fact. Is it unreasonable to think that by the end of this coming decade, more of the food we will eat will be grown closer to home in cities, and that city people will become more directly involved in its production? That's what you're doing here. You're part of a movement, whether you knew it or not. And I do think we are going to be heading that way. So what have I learned? Where have I taken to this? Some of the lessons. So my backyard, I told you, my wife and I bought this property. It had a bunch of raised beds. It had one really big raised bed, probably the size of these 4 together, and then 2 smaller ones. We bought this house in March. I thought, whoa, look at all this. I'm going to grow so much. You know what I grew? I grew what was in the seed bank. Bindweed, horseweed. What are some of the other purslane? You can eat purslane at least, right? Wild lettuce. You familiar with that one? Lactuca. Yeah, a bunch of weeds, right? I planted some onions and garlic in the big bed, and the bindweed immediately choked it out. I thought this isn't going to be as easy as I initially thought. They'd also planted a rose of Sharon bush, the previous owners. That thing sends up shoots that pop up 25 feet away from the base plant. Pretty flower, but I can't eat it. It's kind of useless to me. It is currently my grape trellis. It's dying because I've cut it and the grapes are growing over that. So I thought, woo, man, this is... I not only do I not have a ton of money to do this, I don't have time to do this. I'm a writer. I transcribe interviews. Every interview hour takes 2 to 3 hours to type up. The other thing, I live 1 block from the border of the Indiana Dunes National Park. I live at one of the most biodiverse and one of probably the most biodiverse section of the Indiana Dunes. A lot of people feel the Miller Woods is sort of what it looked like all over before settlement. So I kind of have to think about what I'm putting in my garden. Will seeds blow in? Will a bird eat some kind of invasive and then go drop those seeds in the national park? I have to think about that relationship. My wife's been working at home now for 20 weeks. I love it. Absolutely wonderful to have her there safely. And she loves it because she says, I never realized how many monarch butterflies hang out in our backyard. Well, yeah, I got 200 milkweed plants growing in the backyard this year. They're feasting. I'm part of a science experiment with the Field Museum to measure how successfully monarch butterflies thrive in urban areas. I shouldn't say thrive, we don't know that yet. The data is still being collected. But it did help me realize that I am feeding more than just myself and my wife in my garden, because all the butterflies come hang out. All my other neighbors mow their yards. Some of them use chemicals to keep the weeds out. They all like to have mowed yards. I'm the only one. They've been very tolerant of me with that. No complaints to the city, thankfully. But I think that's important, that the life there has that. You know, one of the first things that grows in the spring is purple dead nettle. Did you get much of that around here? Do you know what purple dead nettle? It's a mint. It's called dead nettle because it looks like stinging nettle, a little miniature, but it's not a nettle. And it's something that people will go spend hours pulling out or use chemicals to get out because it's unsightly in their opinion. It looks like a little mushroom, like a cross between a mushroom and a Christmas tree, a miniature Christmas tree. But some of the insects that come out first, that's their only food source until regular flowers start growing. Same thing with the dandelions, actually. So I just let those started going in one section. I don't necessarily, hello moth, see they like me. I don't necessarily want it everywhere, and I do want to grow food in some places, but what harm is this dead nettle doing? And it dies by the end of May, and it goes away, so it's not taking up I'm not growing anything in May in my backyard, obviously, so I adopted a method, again, that divergent creative thinking, where it's like, well, you know what, maybe I will let certain parts of my yard become dedicated to food that I wouldn't necessarily eat, but the butterflies, bees, wasps, and others do thrive on. And yeah, even in April, I'll have a lot of life in my backyard, which is what we want, because then they'll go pollinate everything else. Part of it is also a scientific motivation, just what's growing in my yard, right? I live right on the border of a national park, a protected area. What's in mine? And you can start thinking, how did it get there? How did the Asian tree of heaven get in? How did that seed come all the way from Asia and get it? There's a history to that. So what I've implemented in my garden is a technique that some artists use called placemaking, which Dom and I have had great discussions in her field. She has to work with placemakers, and sometimes placemakers like to ignore the fact that it's already a place. You know what I'm saying? Like oh, you should do it this way, you should put this up, and then you should do that, and they don't even listen to the folks here. So placemaking's a bit controversial with artists. And then some people will try to, placekeeping. We'll just change a few letters and it's all of a sudden better. No, I think it's more about listening to what's here. And what I found bringing it back to garden is when I take my yard, my backyard's maybe the size of that bed over, that portion of your garden. That's about the size of my backyard right there. When I break it down into the little mint quarter and my research triangle, which is where I'm measuring the monarchs that eat my milkweed up, the big bed, my onion patch, all these little areas, I find I'm more engaged. I will go outside and, watch the sun, but I'll still go out. I'll water the plants every day that need watering every day. So that has been my approach to gardening, placemaking and storytelling, working those. That's the kind of art that I do. This place obviously has a story. What is it? I think that's for you as the stewards of this place to tell. And I think there are multiple ways that you can tell that story. And I think you should. Everyone who uses it should in some way shape that narrative. And you can have whoever's, I don't know if you run this show, Dom, or what, but you can be the person who collects that and make sure that the world hears that. I think there are other things that can be discussed in terms of bringing art into a garden. I did not want to give a talk where I said, oh, put a sculpture, put a mural. I mean, that's obvious. But those are things that can add to an environment like this. And I think that's a worthy discussion for you all to have as well. Painting the wood, if that's something, if people have access to paints or you feel that there's some kind of value into bringing bright color into it. Maybe people like the natural look, but that's a discussion worth having amongst yourselves as you shape this space. And, you think, what do you want to accomplish with it? Maybe it's perfect as it is already. I would not be the one to say it is or it isn't. It does look perfect to me, though. Once I was like, yep, this is beautiful. I love it. A thing I had a discussion, I guess I'll throw out one suggestion, which is maybe find ways to work native plants into somewhere on the periphery. I put in the introduction of my book because you might know Gary was declared the most miserable city in America by Business Insider. It wasn't even an article. It was some data they put into an algorithm. Whoever did the typing never even visited us. And I didn't want to acknowledge that bunk because sometimes you just let it, but I had to. And what I realized after being pushed by my editor, the opposite of misery is self-determination, and all I see in Gary is people living self-determination. So that's how, again, that 180-degree flip in mentality. I even had my own and been here for 40 years almost. And it was like, it is self-determination. That's what it is, and those stories all came into focus for me. We got Caterpillar. Speaking of life, I don't know what it is, but I love you being in a garden, it just seems like it surrounds you,
It's not an inch.
Maybe it is. He looks like about an inch. Does anybody know what that means? I need to study. I've been so focused on monarchs this year, I've ignored all the others. But self-determination, he's going to go get something to eat.
Okay.
And what you're doing out here is self-determination. I think with the young people, why I'm particularly optimistic is the young people seem to understand growing their own food as part of self-determination and liberation, personal, race liberation, economic and class liberation as well. You are much more powerful when you have control of, or more control of your food source, and you are much more powerful when you're eating healthy food.